and jelly spoons, welcome back to Badgerworks. Today, rocks. We're going to have a little different project today. There's something that's been going on in my area recently, which has taken off quite well. People basically painting rocks and hiding them around town for the children to find. It's quite an interesting little hobby people have taken up. The kids love it, and it's nice to think that it encourages the children to actually get out and walk around and look for these rocks. So I've made a few rocks that have hidden around the place, but what I thought I would do is one of the nice things about this is it's an interesting way to practice different painting techniques, because if you get it wrong it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to look at today is weathering, and two methods in particular of a process known as chipping. Now, chipping is when you take a top coat of paint and chip bits of it away to reveal a colour underneath, as if, you know, as something would in real life. As it gets older, the paint weathers and chips and peels off. So I'm going to look at two methods of weathering today, of paint chipping, one using salt and one using hairspray. So the first thing we've got to do, I've got two stones here, so we can do one with salt and one with hairspray. And the first thing we need to do with both of them, because this is quite a porous surface, is I'm going to give both of these a coat of gloss varnish just to seal the rocks before we start. So I'll do that and then we'll come back and get on with it. Okay, so I've just given the rocks a couple of coats of a gloss varnish just to seal the surface. What I've also done is I've masked off the back side of each rock, because I only want the paint on the top side of it. So now I'm going to apply a surface coat. This is Vallejo Gloss Black Surface Primer. I'm going to put this on, and then I'm going to put another coat over the top when this is dry of a Tamiya XF16 flat aluminium. I want these to look like they're metal. That's the look we're going for in the end. The silver going on. The mix in the brush it's 40% flat aluminium XF16 and 60% X20A thinner. But as you can see, going over the top of this gloss black, it really does look the part. So once these have dried, basically we need to seal them again with the gloss varnish, and then we'll move on to the next steps. Right, so we've got the gloss varnish, a couple of coats on both, so that seals the silver. What we're going to do now is apply our chipping mediums. Now, there's lots of different ways you can do this. These, I think, are the most common ways. So on this rock I'm going to use hairspray. Now, you can buy chipping medium. Most paint suppliers have their own version, and they're very good. They work really well. It's just, you can get just as good results using hairspray, and quite frankly hairspray is a lot cheaper. I mean, I just buy the cheapest hairspray I can find, and it works fine for me. So we're going to put hairspray on this one. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're using a chipping medium like hairspray, or, you know, a commercially available one, is the more you apply, the easier the top coat of paint will come off. So you have to be careful, kind of experiment with it, which is one of the good reasons for doing something like this. You can experiment it with it and see how much you need to use to get the effect that you want. Sometimes you want lots of paint to come off, sometimes you only want a little tiny bit to come off. So you can do things like this, mess around with it and find out what works best for you. Another good reason for using hairspray is a lot cheaper. But anyway, I'll just give this a quick spray of hairspray and then we'll move on to the next one. So this is the hairspray that I'm using. It's from Asda. Obviously other brands are available. It's literally the cheapest one I could find. So just take your stone, I'll move the other one out of the way because I don't want that getting hairspray all over it, and just you can decant this into your airbrush and spray it like that, but I find it works just as well straight out the can. Right, I'll probably put far too much on there, but it will give you a good idea of what's going on. So, and then we leave that to dry. What I found works really well is using a hairdryer can greatly speed up the process. So while we're waiting for the other one to dry, we'll take a look at this one. Now, what we need is some water and some salt. So what I've got here is a little plastic cup, I mean any container really, just with the tiniest amount of water. You really don't need a lot for this. A little bit of water, and then here I have got a tub of rock salt. Now there's all different types of salt available. The good thing about this rock salt is the grains are quite coarse. Let me see if I can show you, if the camera will focus. There we go. I don't know whether you can see that, but those grains are quite coarse. What I did was I basically took some very coarse rock salt and I put it in a pestle and mortar and ground it up so that the salt crystals are now all different shapes and sizes, some small, some are larger, some are almost dust. So we get a nice random effect when we put the salt on. So let's put that back in there. So to do this, basically we just need a brush, and I'll just use this one for now, and we just dampen the brush with some water, and you really don't need a lot at all, just it barely damp, and just brush it on just to dampen the surface. And then we take our salt, I'll do it over the pot so it doesn't go everywhere, and just sprinkle it on. Now if it doesn't stick, as you can see it's not sticking very well in certain places, that's fine. Just dampen it a bit more. And again, as with the hairspray, depending on how much you put on will determine how much paint will come off in the end. So if you don't want too much to come off, then don't put a lot of salt on. It really is that simple, really. But it really depends on what kind of effect you're looking for. And there we go, there's a fair bit on there, that will be more than enough. And now the same again, we need to let this dry completely. It needs to be absolutely bone dry. One of the things I'll mention about this particular technique, it works really well, but the problem that you can have, and it's something that I found the first couple of times I tried it, if you don't let the salt dry completely, then what happens is when you spray your colour coat over the top, the salt can actually leach into the paint, and then you end up with this salt rime in the paint, and it has like a white texture to it, and you can't get rid of it, and it doesn't matter how many times you overspray it. So yeah, just go easy with it. Make sure it's completely, totally, utterly bone dry before you put a top coat on it. So we're going to leave this one to dry. Again, we'll put the hairdryer on it and get it absolutely bone dry, and then we'll come back and we'll put our top coats on both sides and then carry on from there. So back in a bit. Okay, so we've got our two rocks now thoroughly dry. So this one has the hairspray, this one has the salt. We're going to apply a top coat, a colour coat to both of them, so it'll be the same colour coat on both. And after that we'll look at how to actually chip the paint. What I'm going to do, in order to make it very obvious which, you know, where it's chipped. I'm going to use this Tamiya XF64 dark iron. So I'm going to apply this to both and then go from there. Now, when you're spraying over the salt, when you spray over the hairspray, it's fine, just spray straight over it. When you're spraying over the salt, you might find some of the salt will blow away. Don't worry about it. Just, you know, it's meant to look rough and ready, so it's fine. Just but you'll see there that some of it is blowing away. You can see like little shiny bits coming up underneath, but that's fine. Don't worry about it if it does that. So the mix in the brush here is, as I mentioned before, it's the Tamiya Dark Iron XF84, and it's a 50-50 mix with the X20 thinner. The pressure on the regulator is 15 pounds. So what you want to do here is try and get a nice even coat over the whole thing. I mean, as you would anyway, but a nice even coat over the whole thing. You can see I'm actually holding the airbrush at a bit of a distance and just moving it in and out as I need to get the coverage that we want. So there we go. So we'll leave these two to dry, and then we'll come back and actually see how well we've done. Back in a bit. Right, okay, so we've given both of these a good chance to dry now. So what I'm going to do first is show you how to chip the hairspray. And it's the same process whether you're using hairspray or whether you're using like a proper chipping medium. Basically, just get yourself a brush, an old one, and some water, and a bit of water on the brush, and just kind of have at it. And you'll see, because I did put a lot of hairspray on this because I wanted to kind of demonstrate, and just kind of poke away at it, and you can see that the silver is starting to show through. It's basically lifting off the colour coat and revealing the silver underneath. So again, just dampen that top coat, and then it depends how you want to do it. You can make scrapes and scratches. The other thing you can do is use something like a cocktail stick and scrape it across the surface. If you're going to do this, mistake I've made many times, be very, very gentle, because it's very easy to put too much pressure on the cocktail stick and go through the whole lot and end up back at the primer. So yeah, just go careful with it. But yeah, so just scratches, little digs and chips. How you want to do it obviously is entirely up to you. It depends what effect you're looking for. But I find it's interesting. Basically, pay attention to raised areas and edges, because they're the sort of places that would naturally be more worn. And yeah, just kind of have at it until you've got the effect you want. It's worth keeping in mind that it's better to take it slowly, because it's easy to take this stuff off, but if you take too much off, then you've got to start again. So just go careful with it, slow and steady. It's not a race. You can also use things like Scotch-Brite. Again, with Scotch-Brite, be very, very careful, because it's very abrasive. So just very gently over the surface, and you'll see that takes quite a lot off quite quickly. So go careful with it. and just keep going until you get the effect that you want. So there you can see basically how it's coming along. As I say, you just keep going until you've got the effect that you want. I think that's coming out quite nicely. So that's the hairspray. So now let's move on to our salt chipping. Now it's a similar process, but you just have to be a little bit more careful. So again, basically what you need is to just take a brush, and this is actually a makeup brush. I find they work really well with it. And just brush, and you can see the salt coming off and leaving the removing the paint as well, and giving you some nice chipping effects. I find that using salt is great if you want rust. I think it works really well, particularly for rust. And obviously you can use a combination of the two if you want to. There's all kinds of different techniques you can use. You know, you're not limited. There are no rules. It's whatever you need to do to get the look that you want. Now sometimes you might find that the salt doesn't come off very well. You might find that there's bits of salt that get stuck. If that's the case, then you can use a slightly stiffer brush, or a toothbrush works very well as well, and just gently brush over it, and that will remove any of the more adhered bits of salt. But you can see on here, you can see this is the salt that's come off with the paint on it. So yeah, I think that's worked really very nicely. So the next step with both of these now, I might just go over them a little bit more just to make sure they're exactly how I want, and then we seal them again with gloss varnish. So I'll go and do that. Back in a bit. So there we have it. There's our two stones. I think they've come out quite nicely. So yeah, there's two different methods you can use for chipping paint. It's actually worth keeping in mind with the salt. There's something else you can use instead of salt. You can actually use Marmite. It's something that I've seen. I've tried it myself and it works very well. Basically, just take a brush and some Marmite, dab it on where you want the salt to chip, or where you want the paint to chip rather. Spray over it and just wash it. It's almost like a combination of the two methods. It allows you a lot more precision control of where you want the chips to go. So worth keeping that in mind as well, because let's face it, you can't eat Marmite, it's disgusting. So you might as well use it for something, and so you can use it for chipping paint. Anyway, I hope this has been of interest to you. It's certainly a fun little project for me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks very much for watching. Cheers. Bye.